Here's a review sheet on Brightspace, and then it's right here too, because we're going to do it together. One of the things, thing one, that I just wanted to finish with is that if you recall, after like all of the different English immigrant groups came, you had other groups coming, the Irish, the Scottish. The largest group that came from actual Europe were Germans and whatnot. And so in the back country is where many of these groups went, because like the main areas and the cities had already been settled. And you know, like in Virginia, the English had already established tobacco farms and like all that stuff. And so they had to go farther and farther inland, okay? Despite that though, because there was so much territory, people that lived in these areas actually lived better than many people who had remained in Europe, okay? And so Pennsylvania became known as the best poor man's country, okay? Because there was so much land, and if you just worked at it, you would be able to make a decent life for yourself. Okay, not super great, but you definitely would not die. Okay, now, was there poverty? Of course there was. Okay, but once again, because of all the land, because of how open things were, you could just, you know, if you were willing to risk animals and natives and like all of that stuff, okay, you could go off into, you know, unknown territory and make your future, okay? And so, because of this, all right, with the exception of the South, in the South, yes, you had the big landowners that had the plantations and they had the slaves and they grew like whatever. But in other areas, you know, you wanted to make, you know, a life, you just go off into the wilderness and clear some land and hope natives don't attack you and you don't get eaten by bears. But if you survived all that, you know, you could make your own little farm, have your own little family, and have a pretty decent life. And you had your own land, which was like the big thing for a lot of people, okay? And in fact, it got to the point where everybody who came just expected to be given or to be able to have a piece of land that they could farm and carve out a decent living. Once again, I'm using that word because you weren't going to be rich, you weren't going to like, you know, have whatever, but you would, you know, with hard work, you'd have a place to live, you'd have food to eat, and that's basically all people wanted, all right? And so, when it came to women, ladies, you're still cooking, you're still cleaning, you're still having babies, all right? But because of the harshness, okay, of life in North America, okay, women had a bit more liberty because, you know, if you only had 2 kids and until they were old enough to work on the farm, okay, Mrs. had to work alongside her husband, okay? Husband gets hurt, the wife has to learn how to shoot a gun and hunt, you know, so the family has food to eat. And of course, once the kids get bigger and then they can start helping, all right, you know, like, you know, we'll send you guys out onto the farm and hunting and helping with chores. But even then, you know, sorry, Maya, you have a daughter, all right, you're still going to teach her not just, you know, cooking, cleaning, making creams out of milk, but, you know, hey, you're going to have to learn how to help build a house and help hunt and help, you know, skin a deer so you can use the fur to make a bed, you know? And so, yeah, women had that liberty. Women had those opportunities, all right? The last thing I realized I never went through, and I didn't put it on a slide, so I'm going to put this here for the review. I was going to do that. I think my mental powers are improving. I never talked about how Georgia came to be. We looked at some of the other colonies. Georgia started off as a penal colony. What do we mean by penal colony? Oh, that's where they sent prisoners. Okay, but they weren't violent prisoners. They sent prisoners from debtors' prisons. Back then, you could be thrown in jail if you owed a lot of money, which honestly never made sense to me, because if you owe money, how are you supposed to pay it back if you're in jail? Okay, so you would have the option, you either go to jail or we send you to Georgia, right, type of thing. And if you've ever been to Georgia, I guess that's, punishment enough. But the reason why is because you had South Carolina, I'm gonna put SC, and you had Florida down here, okay? Florida was Spanish, and people were afraid that the Spanish would try to invade. So Georgia, they were like, it's just a bunch of prisoners anyways. If the Spanish attack, guess who they're gonna kill first? These prisoners, all right? So that's fine, it doesn't matter. So yes, they would send prisoners to Georgia. Eventually, turns out the Spanish really weren't attacking the colonies. They never did, all right? And so eventually, normal people started going to Georgia. So it wasn't just prisoners anymore, all right? And so that's how it started. Right? I know, not as exciting as, William Penn or people dying in Virginia or the Pilgrims and shit like that. Okay, so this is the review guide. Oh my gosh, I have adjusted it. All right. So if you study this, you will do well on the test. The test will be multiple choice and short answer. And when I say short answer, I want short answers. All right. If you feel the need to write a paragraph, stop. All right. Sometimes you'll just need a couple words, sometimes a sentence or two. Okay. I don't need essays. That's why I don't include essay questions. I don't like reading your essays. I like reading them, but I don't have the time. All right. So, where is mine? Here it is. You should know who the first humans in the Americas were. Hunter-gatherers from Asia. They walked across the land bridge, and that's how the area was populated. Okay. FYI, I can already tell you this is a multiple choice question. Okay. So, I'm going to give you 3 wrong choices, and then one of them will say hunter-gatherers from Asia. Okay. Anyone remember who the first actual Europeans were? The Vikings, yes. Okay, let me see. Where are you, Vikings? I'm going to skip over all of this. There we go. Age of Discovery, the Vikings. Okay, once again, this is going to be a multiple choice question. You're going to have ABC, 3 wrong answers, and then Vikings. All right, so the first Europeans were the Vikings. Okay, how did the Crusades lead indirectly? All right, to the age of exploration? Well, number 1, if you want to say that this exposure to Eastern goods, if you want to be specific, pepper, cinnamon, okay, cloves, all right? Oh, and the big one, sugar, okay? We need to figure out a way to get it, okay? And, make our lives better, all right? If you just put exposure to Eastern goods, I would take that. But once again, if you want to, add a little pizzazz, sugar, spices, cinnamon, cloves, that kind of stuff. Pepper, all right? They were looking for those things, okay? Why did the Europeans want a new path to Asia? Because Muslim merchants had a monopoly, okay? And they wanted to avoid that, all right? you might have to, put down, Muslims controlled all of the trade, and, Europeans didn't want to pay high prices, or, Europeans didn't want to deal with Muslim merchants. So, they wanted to avoid the monopoly that Muslims had. All right? Anything that sounds like that will give you points. This one I can tell you is a short answer. Yeah. All right? Questions so far? Okay. Then, the next one, you do need to know who financed Columbus. Where are you, Columbus? And that is Spain. Okay? This one is a multiple choice. I'm going to give you 3 countries and then Spain. All right? Where did Columbus think he had landed? Asia. Okay? All journeys, because he actually took 4 trips. Each trip, oh yeah, there it is. Okay? Columbus was convinced that he had landed in the islands off of the coast of Japan. If you just write Asia, that's fine. All right, if you want to say an island near Japan, that's fine too. Okay, and yeah, just all 4 of his voyages that he took, he always thought that he was in Asia. He never imagined that it was a completely new place. Okay. This was not in the slides, but I did mention it in the lecture, so if you were paying attention or if you took notes. Why is it called America and not Columbia? Who did we name it after? Time?
Well, I don't remember the guy's name. It's because Columbus was wrong and somebody else got there.
Kind of. Chris? Okay, yeah. I almost said muy bien, but very good. Yes. Okay. There was another Italian named Amerigo. His last name was Vespucci, and he was the first one to say, I think Columbus is wrong, and we are not in Asia. I think this is a new world. Okay, a German, and you don't need to know this part, but I mean, you should if you're gonna, talk about it, but not for the test. A German map maker, actually read this, that Amerigo Vespucci said, and he was just like, dude, this Amerigo guy discovered a new world. We're gonna call it America. All right, so yeah, that's why it's called America and not Columbia, because Amerigo Vespucci was the first to say, this is a different place. This is not Asia. Okay? All right. I kind of skipped around, and I apologize. Let me skip over the Aztec question just for a minute and go to number 9. What was the vital error in Columbus's plan that he presented to the king and queen of Spain and the king of Portugal? Thank you. Yes, his math was wrong. He thought the Earth was smaller than it actually was. Huh? That's 9. 9. I said let's skip 8 for a minute because I wrote him out of order, out of sequence. I was jumping around in thoughts. I have water in my mouth. So. Yes, the math was wrong. If you want to add to it, he thought the Earth was smaller than it actually was. And then number 10, define the Columbian Exchange. And I mean, this is the reason why we have Columbus Day and Viking Day, okay? Because products from the old world, if you want to say Europe and Asia, went to America, and products from the New World, if you want to say America, went to Europe and Asia. So, things went from one part of the world to the other, okay? And for full credit, because once again, I can tell you this is a short answer, name name a couple. All right, so in America you had potatoes and tomatoes that went to Europe, and in Europe you had wheat and horses, and those went to America. Or you had cows and pigs in Europe, and those went to America. You know, corn and chocolate went to Europe. Okay, type of thing. If you want to look at the negative side, I suppose, diseases came from Europe, and from America they took back syphilis, you know, type of thing. If you want to go that route. You want to stick to just like the food, you know. Thank you, America, because now we have popcorn and, you know, chocolate and, ooh, peanuts, all right? Ooh, peanut M&Ms, oh my gosh, you know, like type of thing, all right? And I can say thank you, Europeans, because I can put beef on my tacos now, I can put pork on my tacos, because none of that existed before Europeans came. Our tacos were bland. To you Italians, you're welcome, because I don't know what you were putting on your pasta before you got tomatoes from America, you know, type of thing.
I assume like fish contents or something. I assume like fish contents because they did that back in Roman times.
Yeah, probably. Probably oil too.
Yeah.
If you ever had like, you know, oil on your meat. Okay. All right. In this case, okay, number 8. Okay. Why did the Aztecs allow, all right, Cortez or the Spanish to enter their city? There's a couple of different answers, okay? Number one, you can put curiosity, all right? If someone tells you that there's these hairy white men riding giant deer with fire sticks, you know, you're gonna be a little curious, like, what the hell is a hairy white man doing on a giant deer, okay? Is the deer part of the hairy white person, or is he like just riding it, or is it like a centaur, you know, half man, half deer? I don't know. Let's find out. Number one, curiosity. Number two, there was the story of Quetzalcoatl, and if you don't spell it right, that's fine, but of the Aztec god, if you want to say, that was rumored to return. Okay? So, you know, you've heard this story about God coming back, and Cortez kind of matches that description. All right, maybe, you know, can't say no to one of the gods. But of course, probably the most important one, okay? Yeah, Cortez basically forces his way in, you know? Kidnaps the emperor, takes treasure, and, you know, the Aztecs had no choice. So, curiosity, number one. 2, old Aztec legend. And number 3, they went in and, you know, violence. They, you know, forced their way in. Either way, it would have happened. Number 11. This one is a multiple choice, because I think this is now over. For number 11, it should be the Spanish Armada, or the defeat of the Armada. Where are you? Here we are. Okay. Queen Elizabeth, there we go. Okay. Spain tried to conquer England. In 1588, the English defeat the Spanish Armada. And so after 1588, and you can just put the defeat of the Spanish Armada, or you can put 1588 ocean battle. Basically, after that point, Spain begins to fall. England begins to rise as a world power. For number 12, I gave you the answer, because you should know that one of the first English attempts was the colony of Roanoke. All right? I did leave you a space because I do ask, what happened to them? Disappeared without a trace. Don't know what we don't know what happened to them. When they came back, everybody was gone. So the first attempt, Roanoke, and just disappeared without a trace. One of history's fun mysteries. All right. Although FYI, there's this book out there called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter. It's a fantasy vampire thing. If you ever read it, apparently vampires ate them all. So that's one theory, just vampires took them. I don't think it's true. But. All right, first permanent colony in the Americas by the English, okay? And that is Virginia, okay? If you want to be specific, because the answer is in the next question, Jamestown, Virginia. But if you just put Virginia, you got the points. All right? Early life in Jamestown, okay? Disease, high death rate, okay? Few supplies, no treasure. If you just want to put miserable, okay, but lots of people died. There were divisions, there was conflict, they had no supplies, they didn't know how to farm, they had only come for treasure and didn't find any. Dirty water, heat, mosquitoes, disease. All right? Any one of those will get you the credit. Okay? What helped the early settlers in Virginia survive? Number one, it is the last point here, military discipline that John Smith established. So you can just say, if you wanted to say John Smith and his discipline, that's fine. If you wanted to say military discipline by John Smith, that's number one. And of course, number two, the tribes, the natives, felt sorry for them and literally helped them out.
This is also a short answer.
So, harsh discipline by John Smith, or military discipline by John Smith, or John Smith's discipline, however you want to write it, and help from the natives, help from the tribes. They gave them food, they taught them how to farm, they did all. You don't have to be specific if you just put help from the natives. Okay? You should know that the House of Burgesses, where are you, House? The first example of self-government. That's all I need, okay? And honestly, this one's a multiple choice, actually, okay? I asked, what's the importance of the House of Burgesses? The first example of self-government in the colonies. Why was Maryland established as a colony? What was its original purpose? Oops, almost. There we go. A place for Catholics to go. Okay? So that Catholics could avoid persecution. Catholics weren't liked in England, so a place for Catholics to go, or a place for Catholics to settle. However you want to write it. Now, number 18 is definitely a short answer question. I want you to tell me how slavery and indentured servitude were the same and how were they different. Okay? Obviously, you know, whatever ideas you come up with, but what was one way that they were the same?
I have one for Hawaii with a friend.
Okay. How were they the same?
Both included harsh physical labor.
Yeah, hard work. You were working, all right? Harsh physical labor, all right? You were doing the work that whomever did not want to. Was there anything? I think obviously that's the biggest one. Okay? Different? Maya, you said you had a difference?
Yeah, weren't indentured servants then they only have to serve for like 7 years?
They had a limited set time, yeah. The typical contract was 7 years, but it could be shorter, could be longer. But yeah, if you put 7 years, that's fine. If you put it was only a certain amount of time, okay. What else? How else was it different? Do I need to go stand next to Ashley? I think I'm dark enough, right? Yes, slavery was for Africans, for blacks, and typically who were the indentured servants? Yeah, whites, okay? So that was like a huge difference right there. Did black Africans come willingly? No. Whereas, you know, the white indentured servants, you know, they signed a contract. They knew, you know, hey, you know, you pay for my trip, I'm going to, you know, work for you for X amount of time. Right? One of those, two of those, you know, will get you the credit. All right? Why did the Puritans want to reform? Oh, here we are. Okay. Why did they want to reform the Anglican Church, the Church of England? Okay. And it's right there in the first bullet. They thought that the Anglican Church was still too Catholic. Right? They were too Catholic still. I know we broke off from them a while ago. I know we called it quits, but, you know, you guys still wear the big robes and the funny hats. You still use like gold and silver, and you know, you still have a lot of the same prayers and, you know, all of that stuff. Okay? Why do they eventually go to America? Okay, I'm sorry, and if you want to add, you know, the Puritans were very simple. They like to keep things, you know, at its most basic, you know, like nothing elaborate. That's what they wanted in their church. Okay? They go to America because they had gone to the Netherlands, they had gone to Holland, but what was happening to their children? What happens to the children of any immigrant group when you go to another country? Yeah, they started becoming Dutch. They started speaking Dutch, acting Dutch, dressing Dutch, okay? And they're like, well, no, we are still proud English people. We want our children to be English, but we also want to, you know, do our religion the way we want to do, okay? And so, you know, they decided to come to America so that, number one, they could practice their faith, you know, the way they wanted to, and number two, their children and grandchildren and whomever would still be English. Right? They wouldn't be, you know, doing their Dutch thing. All right? I'm not going to spend too much time asking you questions about the Puritans and the Massachusetts Bay Colony, because we know basically their stuff. But, okay, we'll get to family life in a minute. Why was Rhode Island special? What was different about Rhode Island? Religious freedom, yes. If you just write religious freedom, boom, okay? If you want to say you didn't have to practice the religion, you could, you didn't have to listen to the Puritans, whatever, okay? But yes, you didn't have to be a church member to vote, yes, fine. But at its most basic, religious freedom, okay? There was true religious freedom. All right? Almost there. And we did this with Virginia, okay? But this was actually the truth, okay? With every encounter they had, okay? What role do the Native Americans play in the survival of the colonies? It's not on just one slide, but what did the natives do to help the colonists survive? Number one, taught them how to farm, okay? Because, they were used to farming in England, and the land in America was way different, all right? What else besides teaching them how to farm? Taught them how to hunt, yes, different animals, okay, different strategies. Introduced them to tobacco, yes. Can't grow sugarcane, there's no treasure, okay. But here's a way to make money. Now, granted, that wasn't the reason why the natives introduced them to it, but yes, if they hadn't, you're not going to make any money. So introduce them to tobacco.
Is this also a short answer?
Anything else? How did the natives help? I guess in the original days, okay, they gave them food. They literally gave them food, okay, gave them shelter. Some of the natives, literally learned English and negotiated with them, all right? One or two of those will get you credit. So, yeah, Oma, you don't need to write all five of them or whatever. I know you're going to want it. Okay. Who is New York named after? Yes. Okay, whoever said that. Good job. James, the Duke of York. Wish my brother would name something after me, but no, he won't. All right? We can call that Maya land, if you had a brother. Okay? Why does, I'm going to skip over the Carolinas, I apologize. Why does William Penn establish Pennsylvania? Okay? Number one, okay, religious freedom. Okay? But unlike Rhode Island, okay, it wasn't just religious freedom, but and I guess I should come here, true equality. All right? Who did this include? Because remember, even though the colonies advertised freedom and equality, who was it limited to? White men who owned land. Pennsylvania, on the other hand, it wasn't just white men, it was black men, it was native men, it was, any part of Europe that you came from. And not just the men, but who else? Women, yes. True equality for women, okay? Equality for the natives, okay? When it came to owning property, okay, we still want you to be a property owner, but what did they do with the property requirement? Yeah, made it cheap, made it smaller, okay? Instead of 100 acres, dude, you can vote with 10, all right? So they made it a smaller requirement, okay? And yes, William Penn did sell land to settlers cheaper than in other places, all right? Now, how do its liberal policies actually bring down the natives? Okay, well, The problem with being open and accepting and granting everyone freedom is that you're also going to get people who are bad, because, you accept them because you're a good person and you're like, everyone deserves a second chance or a third chance or a fourth chance. Well, they would come to Pennsylvania and they would, basically violate all the treaties, okay? They would go after native land, they would, kill natives, they would, push them out, etc. The next two have to do with indentured servants and Bacon's Rebellion. All right. Most, and I should have put white immigrants, but most immigrants came as indentured servants. After their contract expired, what would end up happening to them? Okay. Unfortunately, it wasn't good. All right. There wasn't a lot of land. All right. So, what does no land mean? No vote. All right. So, if you don't have land, they couldn't vote, okay? Remember, women were outnumbered 5-1, so, only one of you guys would get a woman. The other 4, tough luck, too bad, all right? You don't get a wife, you don't get a family, you don't get, whatever. Meanwhile, so because of this, all right, they basically, and if you just want to say, they had no prospects or they had no future after their contracts were, at least while they were indentured servants, like they got a place to live and food to eat, type of thing. But now they really had no opportunity, okay? And so, you should know then that Bacon's Rebellion was a result of that, okay? 1,000 men, most of them former indentured servants, attack Jamestown. They burn things down, okay? If you want to say it is the first violent and widespread rebellion, you can, in the colonies, in the Americas, you can do that, okay? So, former indentured servants, led by Nathaniel Bacon, go on a rampage, kill people, burn things down, destroy stuff, okay? Because they have no land, they have no vote, they have no women. What is the biggest result of this? Slavery. Slavery becomes more appealing, okay? Because remember, with slaves, and I guess you could also throw this in with the how are they the same, how are they different? Indentured servants eventually got their freedom. Slaves didn't, all right? So, number one, yeah, it costs money, but we never have to give up our slaves, all right, type of thing. So, it made slavery more appealing. I'm throwing my own people under the bus here, but the majority of the slaves that were taken out of Africa, where did they end up? Just from looking at the map. In the Americas, but what part specifically? South America, yeah, South America and the Caribbean, okay? They went to the Portuguese and Spanish colonies, okay? Not to say that like, okay, you Americans, you're forgiven, you have less than 5%. No, it was still bad, all right? But most slaves went to South America, all right? Life in New England versus other areas, okay? Life in New England, where are you? Okay, Oh, I'm sorry, that was on the previous chapter. It was more stable, okay? More families. All right, I know I left it up on the Salem witch trials. Okay, so more stable, more families. Okay, The people tended to be professionals, like they had their trades, whether they were farmers or blacksmiths or whatever. They were more religious. The last three things, and it's like literally what we just covered, okay? How did the colonists live compared to other Europeans, okay? No, it was this one, okay? They lived better than Europeans did. Most colonials had their own land, even if it wasn't a lot, okay? You know, but basically, you know, they had a better life, which is why people kept coming. If you go to the last two, if you go to number 30, that's the one I thought I had first, okay? Who was the largest non-English group? No. The Germans, yes, whoever said that. The Germans were the largest non-English group in the American colonies, in the English colonies. Okay? And unfortunately, this was also on the previous chapter one. Like I said, my brain was jumping between ideas. Two things that we inherited from New England that pretty much all of America still does today. Number one, when you pay your property taxes, what's one of the things that it goes to? Yes, but thank you, whoever said that. Good job. Schools. Okay. New England did this in the areas where they had more than 50 families. In order to provide public education, everybody got taxed, and the tax money went to pay for teachers in a schoolhouse. Okay. We still do that today, and we do it in parts of the country where the Pilgrims never lived. All right, because that was like, you know what, that's not such a bad idea. Make everyone pay a little bit on their property, and then that funds schools. Okay? Now, of course, there's other issues with it, but we won't talk about it. This isn't sociology or political science. All right? The other thing, town halls, okay, where you can come together with other people in your city, in your neighborhood, in your county, whatever, and you can be up there shouting and talking and saying what you want, all right? And you can do this at school board meetings, you can do it at city meetings. I know the city of Utica is every like third Wednesday of the month type of thing. You know, you have these things. To a lesser degree, because it's not everywhere, it's only in the Northeast, but I've had students argue it, because it is a short answer, is the, I had someone put this up once, liquor laws, okay? Because we still follow some Puritan ideas. But the thing is once you leave the Northeast, once you're not in this part of the country anymore, you can walk into Walgreens and buy like vodka, or you can go to Target and buy, you know, whatever you want. Why is like, yeah, Target, I want some Target vodka. You know, they have their own brand, you know, the Good and Gather, you know, type of thing. It's hilarious. All right, yeah, you guys need to leave the Northeast at least, like travel to other parts of the country. You can come back, but because it's not everywhere, like property taxes and town halls, I'm like, maybe I'll give you partial credit, you know. But in this case, if you write that down, then yeah, we, you know, especially up here in the Northeast, we do get our liquor laws from the Pilgrims, like, you know, their idea of what it's supposed to be. All right. Questions or comments? Study those things, and like I said, multiple choice and short answer, okay? There is a